In the quiet corners of Asia's forgotten villages, where the wind speaks like an old widow and the trees never forget who died beneath them, there are stories not told but kept. Welcome to Whispers of Asia. Here we do not shout, we listen to the rustle of robes in empty temples, to the last breath that echoes down a hallway no one dares to enter, to the light that refuses to go out because it remembers. Tonight, we follow the flame of a lantern, a widow's lantern, lit for love, fed with devotion, until it began to glow with something else. They say her husband never returned, but the dead do not always leave, and sometimes the living call them home without meaning to. Let us begin. The widow's lantern, the light that never fades. The village of Vanhua slept early. Nestled in a valley where the river moved like a silver serpent between stone and mist, it was a place the world had largely forgotten. The roofs were low, the doors old, and the trees hung heavy with time. Even the wind that passed through the rice fields seemed reluctant to stir what was buried. But there was one light that never slept. Every night, as the last cooking fires dimmed and families pulled blankets over their tired limbs, a lantern flickered to life at the edge of the village, small, golden, and unwavering. It glowed in the window of an old woman with long silver hair, sat waiting. Her name was Mai. She had lived in that house since she was 17, when she married a fisherman named Bing. He had eyes like dusk, voice like morning, and hands that smelled of river mud and jasmine. They had no children, only long days together, meals shared in silence, and lanterns that lined the porch during every Tet festival. But Bing had not come back from the water one autumn dusk many seasons ago. His boat was found snagged on a branch, empty. No oar, no body, just a single sandal floating nearby. They never held a funeral, not truly. The monks said no soul should be prayed over without being found. It would anger the river spirits. It would confuse the afterlife. Mai had nodded. She had wept behind closed doors. But when the temple bell rang for the missing, she remained silent. And that night, after the final mourners had gone, she lit a lantern. Not on the altar, not for the gods, but in the window. "Come home," she whispered. "I'll keep the light for you." And she did. That first year, villagers offered condolences and shook their heads when they passed her house. The second year, they began to look away. By the fifth, they stopped speaking her name. But the lantern never went out. Rain lashed the village, storms howled through the valley, lightning split the heavens above, but the flame endured, small and golden, like a seed of stubborn hope. Children said the flame had no wick, that it danced even when there was no oil. Some whispered that if you looked into the glass, you could see it blink like an eye. And Mai aged without change. She walked the same path to the well every morning. Her white eye swept the earth behind her like a river of silk. She spoke little, nodded to no one, and returned to her chair before dusk each evening, placing the lantern gently on the windowsill. The old called her mad, the young called her cursed, but the lantern never flickered. Sometimes, on windless nights, when the stars were hidden and the frogs refused to sing, People claimed to see a figure in the fog, walking up the hill toward her house, a shadow that never reached the door, a man who turned away just as the rooster crowed. No one dared ask her, until one day a monk from the north arrived, young, clean-robed, curious. He came with prayer beads and a voice full of reason. He bowed before Mai and said, "Widow, your lantern honors your husband's memory, but grief is like fire. If fed too long, it becomes something else." Mai looked at him with quiet eyes. Then she said, "This is not grief, it is invitation." The monk paused and left before nightfall. That evening, villagers watched from behind curtains, waiting for the storm to prove her wrong. But the clouds rolled past her house like smoke avoiding incense. Not a drop fell, the wind didn't touch her walls, and the lantern glowed on. From that night on, people stopped talking, but they still watched. The widow and the light that would not die. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the valley, where the river curled like a sleeping snake, the water paused and listened. A drought grips the valley, and the villagers beg Mai to extinguish her lantern, believing its endless glow has offended the heavens. Yet the widow refuses, and the light grows only brighter. For 7 summers, the sky forgot how to weep. The river that once wrapped around Vetan like a silken thread began to shrink, its voice fading to a whisper. Fish died, mud cracked like old bone. The fields that once shimmered like emerald silk now wore the color of ash. The people blamed many things: bad harvest, weak prayers, wandering spirits. But their eyes always returned to the same house on the hill, the house where a light still burned every night while theirs went dark. The villagers had tried to ignore it, but as their wells sank lower and the sky turned pale and brittle, patience withered faster than rice in drought. At dusk, a small group of men climbed the path to Mai's house. They were farmers, calloused and sunburned, their tempers as dry as the earth beneath their feet. "Widow," one called, voice cracking in the heat. "The gods have turned from us. The rain won't come because you keep that cursed lantern alive." Mai stood by the doorway, her thin figure wrapped in a plain gray shawl. The evening wind tugged at her hair, streaks of silver falling like threads of moonlight across her shoulders. She said softly, "The rain doesn't fear the light. It fears forgetting." "Then forget him," the man snapped. "Your husband's gone. You call the spirits with that flame, and they've taken our water instead." The others murmured in agreement, shifting uneasily as the lantern flickered behind her, small, steady, and impossibly alive. Mai bowed her head and said softly, "I light it to guide one soul. If others come, it is because they are lost." The eldest man stepped forward. "If you do not stop, the village will, by force if need be." For a long time she said nothing. Then she turned her gaze to the dying horizon, where the sun melted like copper behind the cracked fields. "You may take the light from my hands, but you cannot take it from its hunger." That night, no one dared return. The next day, heat thickened like breath. The sky pulsed white. Every creature sought shade, and even the cicadas went silent. Yet from the window of the widow's house, the lantern still glowed, its small gold flame unwavering. A child passing by with a bucket of empty hope stopped to stare. "Grandmother Mai, why does your flame not go out?" Mai smiled, thin and distant. "I light it not with oil, but with memory." The girl frowned. Memory burns? Only when it must. That night the drought deepened. Wind carried the scent of dust and decay. And then the first strange thing happened. Clouds gathered, thick, heavy, black as ink spilled across the stars. Villagers ran from their houses, arms raised and eyes wide with hope. Thunder rolled over the valley deep and promising, but the rain did not fall. Lightning flashed once, twice, and in that brief light they saw something above Mai's house, a thin column of smoke rising from her window, glowing red from within. The lantern was burning brighter. "See," cried one villager, "it steals the sky's tears." But when they climbed the hill again, they found Mai seated in silence, her eyes half closed, her lips moving in prayer. She was not asking for forgiveness, she was asking for patience. Days passed, the clouds never broke, the river turned to dust, and each night the lantern shone with the same impossible warmth, neither dimming nor dying. Some nights the villagers swore they could see shapes inside the flame, the curved line of a face, the trembling outline of hands reaching. Others said it was a trick of heat, a shimmer of madness. But Mai knew the truth. The longer the drought lasted, the closer the lantern's flame felt to breath. When she leaned near it, she could hear it hum, softly, like her husband once did when he carved wood at night, humming songs about rivers and fate. On the 40th day without rain, the old priest returned to her door. His robes were soaked in sweat, his voice cracked like clay. "Mai," he said, bowing low, "the people are starving, the water is gone, please let the light rest." Mai looked at the lantern, then at him. "The light has outlasted everything," she whispered. "Perhaps the gods are testing devotion." The priest shook his head. "No, the gods do not test, they balance. You are tipping what must be even." Mai rose, her temper trembling. "If love tips the world, then let it fall." That night the flame blazed higher than ever before. It painted her walls gold, her shadows long, her house alive with trembling light. The villagers hid behind shutters as the sky thundered again. Lightning split the heavens and struck the hill. Flames should have devoured her house, but when morning came, nothing was burned. The trees still stood, the roof still glistened with dew, and the lantern still burned, its glow now so bright that it could be seen from across the valley, even under daylight. The villagers whispered prayers of fear. Mai only whispered one name, Bing. And in that moment, for the first time since he vanished, she swore she heard him whisper back, from somewhere behind the flame, "I remember the rain." One night, Mai sees something inside the lantern's glow, not her husband's face, but a child's, pale and weeping. The next morning, a funeral is held for a boy downriver. Whispers begin that the flame no longer waits, it watches. The third moon of drought hung low and red, like an ember clinging to the sky. The earth cracked deeper each day, and silence settled over Vanhua like a funeral shroud. Even the birds had grown too tired to sing. Inside her home on the hill, Mai lit the lantern as always. She no longer needed to touch it with fire. Her hands hovered above the glass, and the flame bloomed on its own, small, golden, obedient. It had become a ritual of breath, of thought. The act of remembering now summoned light. That night, as the wind drifted through the rice husks like a dying breath, Mai sat beside the lantern and whispered her husband's name. Bing. The flame pulsed. She leaned closer. For weeks she had seen flickers, strange shadows, brief warps in the flame's gentle dance. But this time it did not shift randomly, it shaped. A small oval appeared within the glass, and in it, a child's face. Not Bing, not any memory she knew. A boy, eyes wide, cheeks wet, mouth parted in a cry that made no sound. He could not have been more than 6. Mai jerked back. The flame snapped straight, as if ashamed. She blinked, looked again, but the image was gone. The lantern once more glowed quietly, like a river of gold folded in glass. She told herself it was illusion, a trick of hunger, of age. But that night she did not sleep. The next morning, the temple bell rang. It rarely rang twice in the same week, especially now when food was scarce and ceremony scarcer. But today it tolled not once, not twice, but 7 long times. A funeral. Mai stood outside her door and listened. Voices traveled up the river path, low, shaken, soft with grief. A boy had drowned downriver. He had wandered too close to the bank, chasing dragonflies with bare feet. The mud swallowed him without sound. His name was Thun. He was 6. Mai returned to her chair in silence. She lit the lantern again, though the sun was high. The flame flickered once, and within it, for just a breath, she saw him. The same child, eyes now closed, not crying, just waiting. By dusk, the villagers began to murmur. A woman who had passed Mai's house at late at night told others she saw someone sitting beside the widow, someone small with bare feet and dripping hair. Another swore she saw a hand press against the lantern's glass from inside. "She's not guiding the dead, she's inviting them," one man whispered. "She's keeping them," said another. The elder priest warned against gossip, but even he walked faster past Mai's home now. And Mai? She began to dream. In her dreams, she sat not in her house, but in a place made of mist and memory. A garden of lanterns surrounded her, each floating slightly above the ground, swaying gently as if in water. Their light was soft and gold, yet within each one a face stirred. Not just children, old men, women with sorrowful eyes, even a dog, its ears wilted, its tail still. They watched her, not with fear, but with waiting. When she woke, she found ashes beneath her feet. They had not been there the night before. From that day on, each night the lantern showed her a new face, some old, some young, all silent. Some she recognized, a woman who lived downriver, a boy from the rice fields, the woodcutter's aging mother. And when she saw them, the next day always brought news. Someone had passed, peacefully in their sleep, or suddenly without reason. It was no longer a coincidence. The flame had become a mirror, not of the past, but of what was to come. Mai no longer feared it. She kept a small notebook beside her chair. When a face appeared, she wrote the name beside it, if she knew it. If not, she described the eyes, the nose, the curve of a smile. She folded the pages neatly and burned them at dawn. "Let the wind carry the name. Let the soul find its shore," she would whisper. Some part of her knew this was wrong, knew that the lantern was no longer just hers, but something deeper whispered otherwise, that the flame had chosen her not to be a mourner, but a watcher, a keeper of last light. Still, the village changed. Children were no longer allowed to pass her gate. Some villagers crossed themselves when they saw her shadow, but a few quietly began to visit at night. Mothers with sick children, Men with failing fathers. They left fruit, coins, tiny tokens, hoping perhaps to keep their loved one's face from appearing in the flame. Mai never took the offerings. She left them to wither beneath the steps. The lantern she knew could not be bribed. It did not take, it showed, and then it claimed. One evening, just before the sun sank completely, Mai caught her reflection in the lantern's glass. She was pale, hollow-eyed, but behind her, a man stood. Just for a second, tall, familiar. She turned quickly, but no one was there. Only wind, only silence, only the light.
As rumors spread that the lantern shows faces of the dead, Mai retreats further into silence. She stops speaking to the villagers and devotes herself entirely to the flame. The house grows colder. The faces in the lantern become clearer, and the dead begin to visit more than just her. There was a time when Mai spoke with the neighbors. Brief greetings, a nod at the well, a soft thank you when someone left fruit by her door. But that time faded, slowly, like ink left out in the rain. Now she said nothing, not to the shopkeepers, not to the monk who passed her gate, not to the children who lingered too long and ran when she turned her head. She had become part of the house, part of the lantern, a stillness among stillness. The villagers noticed first. "She doesn't blink when you pass," one child whispered. "She doesn't cast a shadow," another said. Though that wasn't true, she still had a shadow. It just didn't move. Not unless she did. And most days, she did not. The house grew colder. Though the sun beat hard on the hills, Mai's windows held frost. Though the wind was warm, her walls whispered like winter. The lantern burned, but did not warm the room. It lit the space, yes, but the light it gave was not for comfort. It was for seeing. And what it showed were faces. Clearer now, more defined. Not fleeting flickers, but portraits formed in flame. Some weeping, some staring, some with mouths open in silent scream. And when Mai looked into the glass, they looked back. They did not ask for help. They did not ask for rest. They only asked to be known. And so she sat, hour after hour, whispering what she saw into the pages of her small leather notebook. She never paused, not to drink, not to eat, not even to weep. The villagers grew restless. One night, a boy threw a stone at her gate and ran. The next morning he woke to find his reflection missing from every surface. No mirror, no water, no glass would show his face. He cried for 3 days. Then quietly, it returned. But he never went near the hill again. Some claimed they saw movement inside her house when she wasn't there. A man in robes pacing. A child with wet footprints. A woman who looked like Mai, but younger, with eyes full of grief and fury. Lantern light danced across the windows even in full daylight, casting shadows where there should be none. One woman swore the light spilled onto her path like water and whispered her dead sister's name. "I didn't say it," she sobbed, "but the flame did. It knew." The priest returned, older now, quieter. He did not climb the hill. He sat at the bottom and called to her, gently. "Mai, if you've become a door, you must learn when to close." But she did not answer, because she was no longer only Mai. She had become a threshold. One evening, just after twilight, she saw her own face in the lantern, but it was not the face she wore. It was younger, fresher, lonelier. And then, just behind that image, another face leaned forward, her husband's, soft and sad, eyes full of questions. She leaned closer. "Bing?" The face did not answer, but it didn't vanish. It lingered, and then turned away. Mai began sleeping less, speaking not at all, even to herself. The silence was not empty. It was full, thick with voices the world had chosen to forget, and now through her they remembered. At night the flame no longer danced. It held still, like breath before a final word. And when the wind passed through her garden, it did not shake the trees. It whispered names, names no one had spoken in years, names that the flame repeated in hushes. And from somewhere within the walls of her quiet house, those names answered. Not in sound, but in presence. The widow remained silent, but the house had begun to speak, and what it whispered was never in her voice.
Mai finds an old urn buried beneath her home, a secret kept from her, a truth denied. Her husband's ashes were never placed in the temple, but hidden in shame. She begins quiet rituals of cleansing, and the lantern's flame shifts, growing steadier and darker. It began with a creak beneath the floorboards. Mai had lived in the house so long that every groan of wood and sigh of wind had become familiar. But this sound, low, hollow, insistent, came not from age, but invitation. She followed it barefoot, the hem of her robe trailing behind her like smoke. In the corner of the room, behind the altar of her husband's untouched belongings, the floor sagged slightly, a place she never disturbed, a place her mother-in-law once told her to avoid. "It is only old boards," the woman had said years ago. "Let the dead lie above, not below." But Mai had learned truth sinks deeper than silence, and silence never rests. With slow, aching hands, she pried loose the planks. Beneath the wood, dust rose like a long-held breath. And there, wrapped in rotting cloth and silence, was an urn, cracked, unmarked, heavy. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. It was warm, not with heat, but memory. She unwrapped the cloth, and there, within the stone belly of the urn, rested a bed of ash, fine, pale, not soot, not wood, bone. Mai knelt, the urn in her lap. Tears fell, not from shock, but from knowing. She had waited, long and faithfully, for a husband whose body had never left. They had kept him from her, ashes hidden like shame, never given a name, never sung into the next life with bells or smoke. She saw it clearly now, why the lantern called the dead. It had no peace to anchor it, no right, no end, only waiting. And so the dead had gathered around her because one among them had never been released. That evening, she did not light the lantern. Instead, she lit incense. She unfolded her white mourning robe, untouched for years, and dressed in silence. She washed her hands in river water fetched from the last deep pool beneath the old stone bridge, and she sat before the altar, the urn resting in the center, the flame unlit, the room still. And then she began to speak. not in prayer, but in memory. She told the empty space stories of the first boat he carved, of the mango tree they planted, of the way he always tapped the bowl 3 times before placing it on the table. She spoke until her throat ached, until dusk crawled into the room like a dark tide. Then she whispered his name, Bing. And only then did she light the lantern. The flame did not leap as it had before. It swayed gently, taller now, thinner, a quiet spine of fire, steady as breath. And for the first time, Mai saw nothing in its glow. No faces, no shapes, no shadows, only the clean pulse of light. She slept that night, without dreams. But peace is never permanent when death is unfinished. The next morning, when she rose to cleanse the urn, she found a thin trail of ash outside her door. It led down the steps, across the garden, to the shrine by the edge of the property, the place where offerings were left for wandering spirits. And there, standing upright, was the urn, untouched, as if carried, as if placed. Mai understood. The soul had not been released. It had only been stirred. To truly return him to silence, she would have to do what had been denied him, a proper rite, a cremation of the cremated, a ritual of release. For the next 7 nights, she gathered the things he loved, the wooden fish charm he carved, a folded piece of cloth from his wedding ao dai, the copper coin he always kept in his sandal for luck. Each was placed beside the urn. She built a small fire in the garden, one that would not burn, only smoke. She whispered verses to the soil. She lit paper boats and let them float in bowls of water. And each night she lit the lantern last. Its flame had changed. It was no longer golden. Now it burned a deeper amber, like the heart of a dying ember. Quiet, heavy, watching. On the final night, she lifted the urn and walked it to the temple. No one joined her, but as she passed through the village, doors opened just a crack, and from within she heard soft voices repeating the prayers she whispered. The urn was placed at the temple's oldest altar. For the first time, Bing's name was written in ink. For the first time, a monk struck the bowl 3 times for him. The earth did not shake, the river did not rise, the flame did not vanish. But something shifted. The next night, when Mai lit the lantern, the flame did not show her a face. It showed her a path. The faint line of light leading out the window, into the field, into the dark. And for the first time, she did not feel alone.
Whispers drift through the night air, carrying voices that echo from unseen mouths. Children glimpse faces in the wind. One girl claims to see a ghostly procession passing through Mai's garden. The flame has grown quiet, but the air around it is not. The wind had always been a gentle thing in Van Hoa. It brushed against bamboo walls like a memory returning home, stirred sleeping lotus ponds with the grace of old songs. But now it had teeth, and it whispered names.
Each night, as the lantern flickered steadily in Mai's window, the wind would rise, not harsh, not howling, but curious. It slid through door frames, under mats, along roof beams, carrying soft voices that never belonged to anyone alive. Children were the first to notice. They spoke of footsteps outside their windows, of someone breathing behind the paper walls, of voices saying their names, not to frighten them, but as if remembering them. And always the voice was not alone. Lan, the baker's youngest daughter, was the first to speak aloud what others only dared feel. She told her grandmother one morning, wide-eyed and whispering, that she had seen a line of people walk past Mai's house, not walking like people, but like smoke pretending to have legs. They passed through the garden, their heads bowed, hands folded. Some carried lanterns made of bone. Some held nothing. None had eyes. When asked how she knew they came from the widow's house, Lan only said, because they stopped at her gate and bowed. The story spread quickly. Old women covered their mirrors in black cloth. Young men placed sprigs of garlic and salt at their doorways. Children refused to sleep near windows that faced the hill. The widow, they said, had become more than a woman. She had become a threshold. Not a gatekeeper, but a gate. Mai, unaware of the village's growing unease, had begun to notice changes of her own. The flame in the lantern no longer revealed faces as clearly, but it whispered in other ways. Sometimes the air would pulse around her, like breath pressing against her skin. Other times, shadows would shift along the walls, too soft to frighten, too slow to ignore. And more than once, the wind would press against her ear and speak not in words, but in knowing. She began to sense when someone would die, not from the flame, but from the space around it. A quiet shiver in the house, a weight in the wind, a name that rose unspoken like steam from rice. One night she stood outside and held the lantern aloft. The garden was silent. Not even the frogs dared sing. She whispered into the wind, "Who walks with you?" The flame pulsed, and in the stillness she heard footsteps in the rice field, soft, deliberate, barefoot. She waited, heart slow and still, but no one came, only the wind and something that watched within it. The next morning she found footprints in the dew, not adult, not child, thin, worn, dozens of them. They led up to the shrine in her yard, then vanished. She did not clean them. She let the footprints remain until the sun drank them away. That week, 3 funerals were held, all peaceful deaths, all expected, but all marked by strange things. In one house, candles refused to stay lit until a lantern was placed near them. In another, the family dog refused to stop barking at an empty chair. And in the last, a mirror cracked clean down the center at the exact moment the eldest son placed incense on the altar. Each family said nothing, but each left a quiet offering at Mai's gate. The villagers no longer spoke to her, but they came. In the hours before dawn, always alone, always in silence, They walked the narrow path to her home and left things. A folded shirt, a letter, a lock of hair, an old photograph. She never touched them, but the wind always took them by morning. One evening, a monk arrived from a nearby province. He had heard whispers of the widow whose flame would not die, who saw the dead in smoke and listened to the wind. He brought her salt, candles, and a warning. You do not guide them anymore. You draw them. Mai listened with quiet eyes. Then she held the lantern out. Would you like to carry it? She asked. He touched the handle and pulled his hand back with a gasp. It knows me, he whispered. Mai only nodded. It knows us all. That night, the wind returned stronger. It spun the prayer chimes on her roof without sound. It pressed the bamboo gate open, though no one walked through. And from her chair she felt it settle around her, not cold, but close, as if wrapping her in every breath that had ever been released in sorrow. She looked to the lantern. Its light was dimmer, but deeper. No longer a flame, now a well. And within it, far below, something watched back. When a visiting priest attempts to extinguish the lantern, the flame leaps, but leaves no burn. That night, he dreams of every soul the lantern has touched. He flees before dawn, whispering that some lights are not meant to be put out. They sent another holy man. Not a monk this time, but a priest from the mountains, young, confident, with hands that had never held a funeral offering, and eyes too clean to see what the wind carried. He came dressed in white robes, trimmed in gold. He carried a small bell, an iron censer, and a vial of blessed water tied to his belt. He bowed before Mai, though not too low, and when he spoke, it was with the careful tone of someone who did not believe, but wanted others to believe he did. Widow Mai, you have invited attention that does not belong to the living. Mai said nothing. The lantern burned softly beside her. It was daytime, but the flame still glowed, dim as breath, steady as a heartbeat. The priest looked at it with distaste. This thing you protect has grown too strong. You believe it is memory, but I see it for what it is, an opening, and through it something watches. He reached for it. Mai's hand moved, barely, not in warning, not in protest, but in farewell. You may try, she said softly, but it will not follow your rules. He lifted the lantern. It was light, lighter than glass should be. He turned it in his palm. The flame danced, but did not flicker. He opened the hatch. No wick, no oil, no source, just the flame, suspended, breathing, as if it knew it was being watched. The priest poured a drop of water inside. The flame blinked, folded, then leapt. A thin tongue of fire arced toward his hand. He dropped the lantern with a cry, but there was no burn, no smoke, no mark, only silence. The lantern lay on its side, unbroken. The flame within slowly righted itself and stared. The priest said nothing for the rest of the day. He sat on Mai's porch, his bell untouched, the censer unopened. He watched the sky change color. He watched the trees hold their breath. He watched the flame grow brighter as dusk approached. That night, Mai brought him tea. He did not drink it. He only asked, "How long has it been watching?" Mai looked out into the dark. "Since the first name I couldn't forget." The priest dreamed that night. In his dream, he stood in a corridor of smoke. On either side were doors, hundreds of them, swaying open and shut without sound. Behind each door was a face. Some he recognized, most he didn't. All of them stared, not with anger, not with fear, but with recognition. He tried to speak, but his voice stayed behind his teeth. Then he heard a bell. Not his, not from this world. It rang once, then stopped, and from every door the same whisper rose. We were seen. He woke before dawn, shaking. He left before the rooster crowed. Did not say goodbye, did not take his bell, did not close the gate. He walked into the forest with no lantern, only silence and eyes in the trees. Mai remained on the porch watching the path long after he had vanished. She held the lantern in her lap. It pulsed like a sleeping animal. When she touched the glass, it was warm. When she closed her eyes, she saw not dreams, but names. Names she had never heard spoken aloud. Names with no graves, no prayers, no stories, only longing. Later that week, the villagers found the priest's bell beneath the old banyan tree, wrapped in a strip of white cloth. And inside the bell, ashes, not warm, but recent. No one searched for him. From that day forward, the lantern was no longer questioned. No more holy men came. No more warnings were given. Even the brave grew careful. They no longer spoke her name openly. They no longer walked past her house after sundown. But some, quietly, shamefully, left letters at her door. Letters with names and coins and prayers. Hoping to be spared, hoping to be remembered, hoping that whatever the flame had become would not forget them. Mai dreams of floating above the village with the lantern in her hands. From each rooftop, a name rises like smoke, drifting toward the flame. She writes each one down. By sunrise, every person named has either vanished or fallen into deep, silent sleep, and not all of them wake. It began with a dream, but the dream did not feel like dreaming. Mai stood above the village, not on a rooftop, not in the sky, but somewhere in between, as if suspended in the space between breath and forgetting. The lantern was in her hands, glowing brighter than ever before. Below her, the houses looked like little islands floating on sea mist. The trees were shadows, the roads were thin threads drawn in dust. And from each rooftop, smoke began to rise. Not fire, not incense, but names. She did not hear them spoken. She saw them, like words written in steam. A grandmother's name, a forgotten son, a man who once carved cradles, a girl who never learned to speak. One by one they rose from every home, some glowing white, some red, some black as coal. The lantern in her hands drew them all. They didn't burn, they merged. Each name folded into the flame like threads of memory returning to their source. When she awoke, she could still feel their weight behind her eyes, and she remembered every single one. She wrote them down, all 100. No ink smudged, no line crossed out. Her hand did not shake. She wrote until the sky outside her window turned the color of clay and the cicadas ceased their morning chant. When she finished, she folded the pages and placed them beneath the lantern. The lantern blinked, and in that blink, something shifted in the air. At dawn, the silence was deeper than usual. The rooster crowed only once. No dogs barked. The temple bell did not ring. By noon, word began to spread, quiet, uneven, like rain that didn't know if it should fall. 6 people had not woken from sleep. 3 more were missing. A fisherman's boat returned without him. A baby's cradle swayed though no one was near. And no one felt surprised. Mai did not leave her house that day. She sat beside the lantern, staring into it, not watching for faces, not listening for wind, only waiting. The flame did not flicker, but it grew heavier. It filled the room not with light, but with presence. It made her walls breathe. It made the shadows stretch. And when she closed her eyes, she saw the village again, only this time it was smaller. Some roofs were gone. Some threads of smoke did not rise. Some names had already been claimed. By nightfall, the villagers knew. Someone, no one admitted who, found the list of names she had written and nailed it to the temple gate. It had no explanation, no warning, only names. They were not arranged in any order, but they glowed faintly, even under moonlight. By morning, the ink had vanished, the paper had crumbled, but those who read it remembered and began to count the days. Some pleaded for their names to be removed. They lit offerings at Mai's gate. They wept beneath her window. They begged for forgiveness they didn't understand. But Mai never came to the door. She only sat by the lantern, eyes closed, lips moving, repeating the names to herself like lullabies. She understood now. This was no longer about Bing. This had never only been about love or grief or waiting. This flame was something older than devotion. It was memory without rest, light without end, and now it was full, too full. So it had begun to release, not through fire, but through forgetting. That night, she dreamed again, but this time she was not alone in the sky. Figures floated beside her. Men, women, children, animals, even monks with melted bells and boys with no mouths. They did not look at her. They looked at the lantern. And from each of their chests, something small and glowing rose. One last name. The name they had not spoken before they died. She gathered them gently, and the lantern accepted them without sound. When she awoke, she had ashes at her door again, but not in a pile, in a shape, a circle, drawn in soot, unbroken. At the center, a name she had never known. When she touched it, the lantern flared just once, and in that moment, she realized the flame was no longer waiting for her to remember. It had begun to remember for itself.
Families began leaving offerings at Mai's doorstep. Rice, incense, small talismans, hoping to appease the flame. But when one man offers silver instead of prayer, he disappears by morning. The villagers learn the lantern does not want payment, it wants remembrance. They began bringing gifts, not openly, not in daylight, but under the veil of night, when the wind stood still and the trees dared not move. Villagers crept up the hill to Mai's home and left offerings at her gate. A bowl of rice, a thread of red string, a wooden comb carved with the name of a child long gone, coins, photographs, jade beads. Some left nothing but a whisper. "Please, not my name." Mai never answered. The lantern never flickered. But by morning the offerings were gone. Word spread that the flame accepted tribute, that if you left something meaningful, something touched by memory, you would be spared. And for a while it seemed true. Those who came to the widow's gate, who bowed, who cried, who remembered, remained untouched by the flame's strange choosing. They walked through their days heavy with fear, but they lived. It was enough. Then a man named Bao came, a merchant, sharp eyes, sharp tongue, not one known for mourning, only for bargaining. He had lost a brother the week before, found slumped in the garden with no wound, no illness, just a look of blank astonishment in his dead eyes. Bao did not cry. He blamed the lantern, he blamed Mai, but he still came. He left no rice, no incense, no name, only a small silver ingot, polished and heavy, placed at the foot of her gate like an insult wrapped in silk. He did not bow, he did not whisper, he spat. "Buy silence if that's what it wants." And he left. That night, the lantern pulsed. Once. Twice. Then steadied. Mai watched from within, unmoving. The flame leaned sideways in the glass, like an ear turned to listen. The wind did not blow, but the air thickened. It filled the house like water, and far below, beneath the roots of the hill, something stirred. At dawn, the villagers found Bao's shoes at the base of the garden steps, still warm, still tied, but no Bao. Only footprints leading toward the house, and none leading away. The silver was gone, but in its place, a smear of ash shaped like a question mark. After that, no one brought coins. The offerings changed. A girl left a feather from her mother's pillow. A man brought the broken toy his son once loved. A grandmother offered a single black braid bound with twine. None of them asked for favors. They left only memory, only weight, only sorrow. And those were the offerings the flame accepted. Mai understood. The lantern was not hungry, it was full. It did not ask for more. It asked for what had been lost, what had been denied. Names not spoken, tears not wept, farewells never finished. It fed not on death, but on what death left behind. That week, Mai began to tend the offerings herself, not to keep them, but to bury them. She walked to the shrine at the back of her garden and placed each item in a woven basket. At nightfall, she lit a candle beside them and whispered only 2 words, "You mattered." Then she let the wind take the flame. It never failed, and still the lantern burned. Even when the moon turned away, even when fog swallowed the fields and no stars could be seen, the flame danced gently behind its glass as if nodding with satisfaction. But once, only once, it flared without warning. Mai was writing names again when it happened. She looked up. Inside the flame, she saw a hand, not reaching, not warning, holding something. A coin. Silver. And then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. Only the flame remained, still, silent, waiting. The next morning, a new offering was found at the shrine, not left by Mai. A single shoe, covered in dust, still warm.
Beside it, a torn slip of paper with no words, only a single thumbprint burned into the surface. From then on, no one offered out of fear. Only love, only longing, only truth, and in that truth, the lantern dimmed slightly, as if satisfied, but not finished, never finished.
The river that once gave life to Vanhua dries to cracked earth. The villagers grow desperate and turn their frustration toward Mai, believing the lantern's endless flame has offended the balance. But the lantern does not respond to blame, only to what is forgotten. The river no longer sang. Once it had wrapped around the village like a mother's arm, slow, steady, nourishing. It had carried boats and children's laughter. It had cooled the stones and fed the fields. Now it was gone. Not reduced, not dwindled. Gone. Its bed lay exposed beneath the sun, a twisted skeleton of stone and clay. Dead fish glistened like coins, their mouths frozen in silent protest. The frogs had long since fallen quiet. The reeds stood like brittle spears, and the wind, when it passed over, made no sound. It was as if the river had forgotten how to return. The villagers tried everything. They built small altars of stone and ash, left bowls of rice at the dried banks, wrote prayers in charcoal and pushed them into the mud. Nothing answered. One by one, the fields failed. The rice yellowed before it ripened. The wells grew shallow, then dry. Then came the blaming. Not loud, not sudden, but soft and steady. A whisper at first. She lights the lantern while the rest of us beg the sky. A murmur the next day. It burns while we thirst. Then eventually a voice in the marketplace. What flame takes without giving back? Mai said nothing. She had heard the wind long before it carried words. She knew the rhythm of resentment. It always began as worry. She did not answer. She did not stop. Each night she lit the lantern. Each night it burned as it always had, soft, low, golden. But it was no longer a comfort. It was a reminder that something still breathed in a world where everything else was fading. On the 15th day without water, the village held a meeting. They gathered under the banyan tree beside the old bell tower, where judgment had once been passed in quieter times. No one said her name, but all eyes turned toward the hill. That night, a group of 5 climbed the path to her house. Not with torches, not with fire, but with ropes and wet cloths and a wooden bucket filled with sand. They found Mai sitting on her porch, as always. The lantern sat beside her, glowing steady in the dark. She did not rise. The leader, a tall man with cracked lips and sorrow in his eyes, spoke. "We need the river more than memory." Mai looked up at him. "And what is a river, if not memory?" she asked gently. No one answered. The man stepped forward. He reached for the lantern. Mai did not resist. He lifted it from the porch and set it in the sand bucket. The others poured water over it. Nothing happened. The flame danced. They tried again and again. Wet cloths, dirt, ash. The lantern hissed but did not die.
And then, just as one reached for it again, the flame leapt. It grew tall, thin, blue at the edges, and from within it came sound. A single breath, drawn in, as if the lantern had just woken up. The men fell back. One screamed. The sand caught fire, but did not burn. The flame rose into the air just an inch, then settled. Smaller now, but sharper, like an eye half opened, watching, waiting. The villagers did not try again. The bucket was left behind, charred, empty. The next morning, the shrine by Mai's garden held 5 new offerings. Not from her. Rings, hair, a torn piece of shirt, a name carved into wood. Remorse, offered quietly. The river did not return, but the wind did. And for the first time in days, the sky clouded over, softly, like breath fogging glass. Not rain, not yet, but promise. Mai stood at the dry edge of the riverbed and lowered the lantern toward the cracked earth. She whispered, "You remember where to go. You remember how to flow. Come back when the names are finished." The flame pulsed once, and below her a single line of wetness appeared, dark, thin, winding through the dust. The villagers watched from the hill. No one spoke. No one cheered. They simply watched the widow walk back up the path, holding the flame that refused to die. And behind her, a breeze passed over the riverbed, carrying the smell of rain, not yet fallen.
Mai no longer sleeps. She sits by the lantern, night after night, whispering names she cannot forget. Each time she speaks, the flame pulses, and someone in the village dies quietly. The villagers grow fearful, but she cannot stop. She is no longer waiting. She is remembering. The lantern no longer dimmed at dawn. Its light remained soft and constant, even as the sun crept across the horizon. The house no longer knew darkness, nor rest, nor sleep. Neither did Mai. She had stopped closing her eyes. At first, it was small, a mist nap, a long dusk turned into night. But over time, the silence became her blanket, the flicker of the lantern her only breath. She no longer climbed into bed. She no longer folded her hands in sleep. She simply remained. Each night she sat before the flame, a notebook on her lap, her fingers stained with ink. She wrote names. She whispered them aloud. And each time she did, the flame swelled, like a heart pulled tighter. "Thal," she whispered one night. The lantern pulsed. By morning, the midwife was gone. "Liem," she breathed. The flame tilted sideways. By noon, the boatman's ferry returned empty. "Juen," she murmured. The glow flared with gold. By dusk, the girl's mirror cracked down the center. No violence, no suffering, just a stillness that folded around the village like soft linen and did not lift. At first, the villagers thought coincidence, then a pattern, then certainty. No one dared speak to her. No one climbed the hill. They only watched her from afar, like one might watch an eclipse through shaded glass. knowing that looking too closely would leave them blind. And still she wrote. Her voice grew hoarse, her skin pale, her hair turned the color of smoke, but her eyes stayed clear, unblinking. She spoke names she had never learned, names no one had said in years, names buried under rice fields and swallowed by floods. She remembered the forgotten, and the lantern listened. Some tried to plead. A child's mother stood at the base of the hill and shouted into the wind, "Take me instead!" But the flame did not trade. It collected. It called. It chose. And Mai? She did not mourn. She was beyond mourning now. She was not guiding them to rest. She was guiding them back to be seen one final time before the earth took them. One evening, the village elder, who had lived through 2 floods and 3 wars, climbed the path to her house. He carried no gift, only a question. "Do you mean to remember us all?" Mai did not turn her head. She was staring into the lantern. "I don't choose the names. I only speak what the flame gives me." "But you speak them," he said gently. "That gives them weight." She nodded. "Because no one else will." He knelt beside her. "And when you finish?" She did not answer, because she already knew. The flame would have one last name to burn, her own. That night, the flame shifted. It grew thin, silver, quiet. No longer a tongue of fire, now a thread of smoke. And inside it, Mai saw not names, but faces, dozens, all the ones she had called. They were not angry, not sad. They were waiting, not for her, for the last word. Mai leaned close, and in the faint shimmer of light, she whispered, "I see you." The flame pulsed, then went still. For the first time in weeks, she slept. Only a few hours, only in the chair. But when she opened her eyes, the dawn had come, and the flame still burned, just enough to see by. The villagers found small tokens scattered throughout the town, a toy boat, a scarf, a note with a single line. "She said my name." And in every house that received one, peace, as if the weight had lifted, as if the air had remembered how to move. But they did not forget. They could not, because she still sat in that chair, every night, every name, and the flame still listened. A storm rolls into the village, and the lantern flares violently. That night, figures begin to appear in the streets, familiar, silent, impossible. The villagers hide, afraid to look too closely. But the dead do not knock. They only pass through, as if remembering the places that once remembered them. It began with the wind, not a breeze, not a howl, a slow push like the breath of something that had waited a long time to exhale. It rolled down from the mountains and coiled through the rice fields, heavy with scent, old paper, wet ash, and something sweet beneath it, something like decay. Mai felt it before it touched the house. The lantern pulsed, once, twice, then again, but not with its usual warmth. This light was sharp, white-hot, restless, and the flame, for the first time, cast shadows that moved on their own. By nightfall, the clouds had gathered like mourners. They did not flash, they did not roar, they hovered, low, gray, heavy. And then it began to rain. Slow at first, thick drops that splashed like footsteps, then faster, and with it came them. Lan, the baker's girl, was the first to see them. She looked out her window and gasped. There, in the street, stood her grandfather, dead 5 years now. He wore his old fishing coat, still patched at the elbows. He held nothing. He said nothing, but he looked at her window and then turned away. Moments later, her younger brother screamed. He had seen their uncle in the back garden, placing a pair of sandals on the grass. Each family, each home, saw someone. Not all at once, not loudly, but slowly. A procession of memory in the shape of the dead. They didn't knock. They didn't cry. They simply walked. Through doors, across porches, into rooms. And when they left, nothing was missing. Nothing was moved. But the air was heavier. As if grief had returned to reclaim what had not been properly grieved. The villagers stayed inside, windows shuttered, doors bolted, prayers whispered. But they peeked. They had to. And what they saw would never be spoken aloud. A girl who died before her 2nd birthday, crawling across the floor of her mother's house. A husband standing at the foot of a bed he once slept in, holding a shirt that had never been thrown away. A teacher who had drowned in the flood, writing names in the dirt with a bone. And all of them glowed. Not with lantern light, but with something else. Something borrowed, reflected, drawn. And all of it came from the house on the hill, from Mai's lantern, which now blazed like a second sun, white at the core, violet at the edges, spinning slowly in its glass prison. Inside, Mai did not speak. She sat still. The flame danced faster than her eyes could follow. The room around her had vanished. There were only names, spoken, unspoken, and beyond the window, figures gathering in the rain. They did not come for her. They came for the flame, and she was simply the one holding it. A knock came, not on her door, but from inside the walls. 3 times, soft, hollow, like knuckles tapping on memory. She did not rise. The flame flared, and the knock faded. At dawn, the storm stopped. The sky did not brighten, but the wind stilled. The water dripped from the roofs like tears not yet wiped. And the dead were gone. No footprints, no sign, only silence. And steam rising from the wet earth, thin threads of light floating upward, like names returning to where names begin. The villagers emerged, cautiously, eyes sunken, hearts unsure. Some had tears, some had smiles, but all had seen, and all remembered. One house found a letter nailed to its door in handwriting no one recognized. It read, "I forgive you." Another found a bowl filled with water that never dried. Another found the scent of jasmine lingering in the air, where once a mother used to sing. And at Mai's gate, the offerings had been rearranged, no longer in piles, but in a circle, a ring of memory, around a single word scratched into the dirt. return. The flame did not dim, but it no longer danced. It sat, heavy, still, like it had finished something and was waiting to begin again. After years of silence, the lantern reveals the one face Mai has longed to see, her husband, Bin. But he does not speak. He simply stands behind her, sorrowful and distant. And when she reaches for him, she realizes he is not alone. She had waited so long, through seasons that forgot to bloom, through rains that only whispered, through dreams that clung like wet cloth. Mai had waited. She had seen children in the flame. She had seen strangers, villagers, monks, even herself, but never him. Never the one she lit the first flame for. Never Bin. Until now. It happened on a night without stars. The sky hung black and unfinished, as though someone had forgotten to paint the moon. Mai sat in her usual chair, hands resting on the arms like fallen leaves. The lantern flickered softly, a low golden breath. She was not writing. She was not whispering names, only watching. And then he was there. Not in the glass, not in the fire, but behind her. She did not turn. She didn't need to. She knew the shape of his breath, the weight of his silence, the way the air thickened around him like mist around a riverbank. Bin. His name rose in her chest, but she did not speak it. Instead, she closed her eyes, and he stepped closer. His footsteps made no sound, but her heart remembered the rhythm. He had not changed, still tall, still solemn, but his face, it held sadness that had not been there before, a sadness deeper than death. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The flame flared briefly, then stilled, and in the lantern's glow, his shadow stretched across the wall. But it wasn't alone. There was another shape, smaller, lighter, shifting behind him like smoke, pretending to follow. And then another, and another. Children, women, men with mouths sewn shut, a dog with no eyes, a girl who walked backward. They stood in silence behind Bin, their forms vague but present, not threatening, not warm, just waiting. Bin turned his head toward her. His eyes held no accusation, only ache, the kind that comes when you're remembered for too long, when you're kept from leaving. Mai's lips trembled. "I did not mean to keep you," she whispered. The lantern pulsed once. Bin took another step, but not toward her, toward the flame. She stood, suddenly aware of her hands, her bones, her age. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the space where his hand should be, and felt not cold, not warmth, just the soft resistance of what used to be, like a name half forgotten, like memory saying goodbye. The figures behind him did not move, but one by one their faces turned toward the flame. Bin looked back at her once more. He nodded, not in farewell, but in forgiveness. And then, slowly, he walked into the lantern. Not burned, not consumed, just folded into light, as if he had always been there, waiting to return. The flame did not grow. It did not fade. It simply changed. Its color deepened, amber with a core of silver, as if day and night had decided to share the same breath. And from its center, Mai saw one last image. A river, flowing again, and a small boat drifting away. No oars, no anchor, only a single empty lantern tied to its bow. She fell to her knees, not in grief, not in surrender, but in release. Her tears did not burn when they fell onto the lantern's glass, and for the first time in years she felt her chest rise fully, cleanly, as if all the breath she had ever held had finally exhaled. Outside, the wind carried no names. The dead no longer walked the path, and in the village below, the dogs slept through the night. No knocks, no shadows, no visits, only dreams. Mai sat back in her chair, her hands trembling. The flame was quiet now, not watching, not showing, just still. But she knew the end was near. There was only one name left.
With Bin gone and the dead no longer walking, the village began to heal. But the lantern still burns. One morning, Mai carries it to the riverbed where everything began. She kneels, whispers the last name, her own, and releases the flame. It flickers once and fades. The village was quiet again. Not silent, but quiet. Birdsong returned, cautious but steady. Children began to laugh again, though never near the hill. The river had begun to flow, a thin stream at first, then stronger, as if drawn back by something it could finally forgive. The fields turned green again. The frogs sang, and the temple bell rang without echo. No more faces in the lantern, no more names in the wind. Mai still sat by the flame each night, but the notebook had been closed. The ink had dried. There were no names left, only one, hers. She had felt it growing. Not fear, not sadness, just completion. Like a season finishing, like dusk folding into night without regret. She had remembered everyone, but no one would remember her. Not properly. And that was right, because the keeper of the light must go unseen for the light to remain pure. The flame burned lower now, not weaker, just ready. It no longer lit the whole room, just the space around her hands, as if it too was shrinking into memory. One morning, as the mist rose over the hills like soft breath, Mai rose from her chair. She picked up the lantern, lighter than ever before, and walked down the hill. No one stopped her. Those who saw her simply bowed their heads, as if sensing something sacred was passing through. She walked past the banyan tree, past the crumbling shrine, past the stone marker with no name carved into it. She walked to the river,
to the place where Bin's sandal had once been found. The water was shallow now, but moving. It whispered against the rocks like someone praying beneath their breath. Mai knelt. The flame pulsed. She looked into the glass. There were no faces, no shadows, only her reflection, aged, worn, but peaceful, and for the first time, smiling. She touched the surface of the water, cold, but not cruel. She set the lantern on the water's edge. It floated, gently, like a paper boat. She whispered a single word, Mai. The flame flickered, once, twice, then held. She whispered again, remember me as one who remembered. And then she let go. The lantern drifted out, slow and steady, the current just enough to carry it. The flame glowed amber, then silver, then a color that had no name, and then one last flicker, soft, like a candle bowing to wind, and the light was gone. No smoke, no spark, just water and sky and silence. When the villagers reached the river later that day, they found only her footprints and a circle of smooth stones where the lantern had rested. In the center, a single petal, white, unbruised, glowing faintly in the sun. No one spoke of Mai afterward, not in stories, not in whispers. But each year, on the same day, someone would place a small lantern by the riverbank, never lit, just there, waiting. And once, only once, someone claimed they saw a figure walking upstream at dawn, a woman in white, barefoot, carrying nothing, but the wind around her smelled of memory, and her shadow flickered.